The communication bay of the ESV Perseverance was never a quiet place, but it had its calm hours. Late shift was one of them. The hum of the ship's engines filled the walls. The lights were dimmed to a soft blue, and most of the crew was either asleep or pretending to be. Kang sat at the main desk with a cold cup of coffee in one hand and a thick stack of trade route proposals in the other. He had been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Una was across from him, her feet tucked under her chair, her eyes moving quickly across her own screen. She was the ship's communications officer, and she had a habit of reading three things at once. Right now, she was cross-referencing signal logs from the past week, eating a rice cracker, and humming something quietly to herself. Kang didn't know the song. He didn't ask. If they were close to Vethal territory, not inside it, just close. The kind of close that required careful behavior, measured words, and no sudden movements. The Vethal Empire was old, very old. They had been traveling between stars when humanity was still figuring out how to build boats. They were not cruel exactly, but they were proud, and they did not think highly of younger civilizations. Earth's diplomatic missions into their territory were always walked on glass. Kang had been doing this for 11 years. He was good at walking on glass. Then every screen in the bay went white. It wasn't a gradual thing. 1 second, everything was normal, and the next, every panel, every monitor, every display on the entire ship lit up at once with a single incoming signal. It hit every channel simultaneously. Military, civilian, emergency, a diplomatic, all of them. Unencrypted, full spectrum, and very loud. Una knocked her rice crackers off the desk. Kang's coffee spilled across the trade proposals. The face that appeared on the main screen was not human. She had 4 eyes, 2 large ones in the center of her face and 2 smaller ones near her temples, all of them glowing faintly gold, the way a lamp glows through thin paper. Her skin was pale silver gray, her features sharp and angular, and she wore the deep crimson of the Vethal royal house. She was young, as far as Kang could judge alien ages, but there was nothing young about the look on her face. She was furious, the kind of furious that had been building for a while and had finally found somewhere to go. This was Princess Velhari, crown princess of the Vethal Empire, the daughter of Sovereign Orin himself. Because she did not introduce herself. She did not give a formal greeting. She looked directly into the camera with all 4 eyes and she started talking. And what came out of her mouth was not a diplomatic message. It was a storm. She said that humanity had committed an act of war. She said that a Vethal deep space relay station in Sector 9 of their outer territory had been destroyed 3 days ago. She said 17 Vethal workers had been killed, not soldiers, workers, people who managed communications equipment and went home to their families. She said the energy readings at the site matched human military technology. She said that Earth had violated 3 separate clauses of the Outer Reach Accord, the treaty that had kept an uneasy peace between humanity and the Empire for the past 40 years. She said all of this without pausing. Her claws, long, dark, and curved, cracked into the armrest of her throne as she spoke. The throne cracked, she didn't notice. Behind Kang, the door to the bay burst open. Dohun, the ship's chief engineer, came in with grease on his forearms and confusion on his face. Mirai, the xenobiologist, was right behind him, still holding a datapad. Other crew members crowded the doorway. Everyone had felt the signal hit the ship. Everyone wanted to know what was happening. What was happening was that one of the most powerful people in the known galaxy was screaming at them in the middle of the night. Kang did not move. He sat still in his chair with the spilled coffee spreading slowly across his papers, and he listened. He let her talk. He did not hold up a hand, did not try to cut in. Us did not flinch when her voice rose or when she leaned close to the camera with her gold eyes burning. He just listened, the way a man listens when he knows that what he says next matters more than anything he has said in his entire career. Una had gone completely still. Dohun had stopped in the middle of the room. Mirai's datapad was forgotten at her side. Nobody breathed very much. When Velhari finally stopped, the silence was enormous. Kang set down what was left of his coffee cup. He straightened in his chair. He looked at the princess on the screen the same way he looked at anyone he was speaking to, directly, calmly, without performance. And then he asked her one question, just one. Which station, Your Highness? Not we didn't do it. Not you have no proof. Not this is an outrage. Just which station? Ma Valari's mouth had been open, ready to continue. She closed it. Her four eyes blinked. Not together, but in sequence, the way the Vethal blinked when something surprised them. It was a very small thing, that blink, but Yuna caught it and wrote it down immediately on her notepad without knowing why. The princess stared at Kang. He waited. The hum of the ship filled the silence. Relay Station 9 outer, Velhari said finally. Her voice was different now. Still hard, still controlled, but the sheer force of the rage had shifted slightly. Something else was sitting underneath it. Something that looked, just at the edges, like uncertainty. Sector 9, outer boundary marker. It was destroyed at 0340 on the 14th. Kang nodded slowly. Thank you, he said. Hanor, I would like to request a temporary suspension of this channel, 20 minutes, so that I can gather information and speak with you properly. I am not asking you to believe anything yet. I am asking for 20 minutes. Another long pause. Velhari looked at him the way someone looks at a door they expected to be locked and found open instead. 20 minutes, she said. The screen went dark. For a moment, no one in the base said anything. Then Do-hoon let out a long breath and sat down on the edge of a console that was definitely not meant for sitting on. Mirai put her datapad down carefully on a desk. Yuna was already pulling up sector maps and energy logs, her fingers moving fast. Kang stood up, picked up his soaked trade proposals, dropped them in the waste bin, and looked at his team. Do-hoon, he said, I need everything we have on our fleet positions for the 14th. Every log, every coordinate, everything. He looked at Mirai. I need you to pull whatever data we have on that relay station. Construction, power source, anything. He looked at Yuna. And I need you to tell me what you're already looking at. Yuna didn't look up from her screen. I'm already looking at it, she said. Kang nodded. Then let's get to work. Do-hoon moved fast when he needed to. Most people who met him for the first time thought he was slow. He was big, broad-shouldered, and he talked in the careful way of someone who liked to think before he spoke. But when something mechanical was broken, or when numbers needed to be found quickly, he became a different kind of person. His hands moved across the archive panels like they had their own memory. And he had the fleet logs up in 4 minutes. The ESV Perseverance was an Earth diplomatic vessel, which meant it did not carry weapons, it did not have the speed of a military ship, and its crew was small. What it did have, what every human ship in deep space had, by law and by habit, was data. Every movement the ship made was recorded automatically. Every hour the ship's position was logged and transmitted to 3 separate satellites stationed at different points in known space. It was not a military system. It was not even primarily a security system. It was just something humans did because, a long time ago, a ship had gotten lost and nobody could find it, and that had felt unacceptable to the people who built the next ships. Humans logged everything. It was almost a reflex at this point. Do-hoon pulled up the logs from the 14th and spread them across the main display in the war room, which was really just a slightly larger room with better screens. Kang stood in the center. Mirai stood to his left with her arms crossed, reading numbers. Yuna was connected remotely from the communications bay, still pulling additional data. The 14th, Station 9 outer, destroyed at 0340. At 0340 on the 14th, the Perseverance had been approximately 6 light hours from the station's location. 6 light hours was not close. 6 light hours meant that even if they had fired some kind of weapon at that exact moment, which they hadn't and couldn't, the shot would have taken 6 hours to arrive. The timeline didn't work. The math didn't allow it. But it wasn't just the Perseverance. Do-hoon pulled up the full Earth fleet registry for that sector. There were 4 other human vessels operating near Vethal space on the 14th. A science survey ship, a supply runner, a small commercial freighter, and 1 Earth Navy escort vessel that had been stationed at the outer boundary marker 3 sectors over. Do-hoon pulled all of their logs. Every one of them had been logged, transmitted, and time-stamped by the satellite network. Every single one of them showed clear, unbroken position data for the entire day of the 14th. Not one human ship had been within 4 light hours of Station 9 outer at the time of its destruction. That's clean, Mireille said quietly. She was not someone who said things she didn't mean, so when she said something was clean, it was clean. Kang looked at the numbers for a long time. Then he looked at Dohun. Everything? Everything, Dohun said. Every log, every satellite confirmation. I can print you the raw data in 6 different formats if you want. She'll want the raw data, Kang said. All of it. Don't organize it. Don't summarize it. Don't make it easier to read. Send it exactly as it comes. Dohun raised an eyebrow. You want it messy? I want it real, Kang said. A summary is something you made. Raw data is something the satellites made. There's a difference in what people believe. Dohun understood that. He nodded and went back to his console. Miri had pulled up what she could find on Station 9 Outer. It was a relay station, which meant its job was to receive, amplify, and forward communication signals across a large stretch of empty space. It ran on a standard Vethal fusion core, and the station had been active for 60 years. It had a crew rotation of 24, though at the time of the destruction, only 17 had been on shift. The others had been off rotation on a rest transport 2 sectors away. Those 17 had not survived. The destruction, according to the sensor readings the Vethal had released publicly, probably by accident, probably in their fury, had been sudden and complete. One moment the station was active, the next moment nothing. The energy signature of the explosion was high yield and very specific. Mireille pulled the signature data and compared it against the known weapons profiles in the human database. Nothing matched. She ran it again. Still nothing. Then she ran it against the Vethal military weapons database, which Earth's intelligence services had spent 30 years quietly compiling from public records, old battle sites, and traded information. She found a match in 11 seconds. The energy signature of the explosion that destroyed Station 9 Outer was consistent with a Vethal military-grade pulse weapon, not human technology, Vethal technology. She stared at the result for a moment. Then she called Kang over and showed him without saying anything. He read it. His face didn't change much, but she had worked with him long enough to notice the small shift around his eyes. Don't say that to her yet, he said. Just send her our fleet data. You don't want to show her the signature match? Not yet. Right now I want to show her that we didn't do it. What comes after that is a different conversation. He checked the time. Adam, we have 4 minutes. Yuna's voice came through the room's speaker. Kang, I found something in the station's last broadcast. What kind of something? I'm not sure yet. It's small. Give me until we reconnect. He gave her until they reconnected. At exactly the 20-minute mark, Kang opened the channel himself. Velhari appeared on screen almost immediately, which meant she had been waiting. She was still in the same room, still in the same posture, straight-backed, composed, but the kind of composed that took effort to maintain. The armrest of her throne had been replaced, or she had moved to a different chair, because her claws were resting flat now. Kang spoke before she could. Your Highness, I am transmitting our full fleet logs for the 14th, raw data, satellite-confirmed timestamps. I'd position records for every Earth vessel operating in your sector on that day. I am not asking you to accept a summary or take my word for anything. I am sending you the data as it exists, and I encourage you to have your own people verify it. A pause. You're transmitting it now? It is already in your buffer, Kang said. Another pause. Longer this time. He could see very faintly one of her smaller eyes move to the side, checking a screen he couldn't see. Why? She asked. The question surprised him slightly. Not the word, but the way she said it. Not suspicious, not hostile, just genuinely asking, like the answer mattered to her for reasons that had nothing to do with politics. Because 17 people died, Kang said, and whatever happened to them deserves a real answer, not a diplomatic argument. He kept his voice level. We did not destroy your station, Your Highness. The data will show you that. But I think you already have a feeling that something about this situation is not what it appears to be. Otherwise, you would not have given me 20 minutes. You would have ended the channel. Velhari looked at him, all 4 eyes, for a long, flat moment. She closed the channel without a word. Kang turned back to his team. She's going to check the data, he said. When she calls back, it'll be different. He looked at Yuna's empty chair. What did she find? From the speaker, Yuna's voice was careful and precise. There's a signal buried in the station's last 4 seconds of broadcast. It's looping. 4 seconds repeating. Someone hid it inside the standard frequency noise. A pause. It's a distress signal, Kang. And when it contains a name. Yuna had not planned to become an expert in Vethal communication patterns. It had started 3 years ago, during a long transit between systems, when there was not much to do, and she had found, buried in the ship's archive, a collection of old Vethal signal recordings, public broadcasts, emergency frequencies, routine station pings. She had started listening to them the way other people listen to music. After a while, she began to notice things. Small things. The way their signals had rhythm. The way the rhythm changed when the signal was stressed or corrupted or layered over something else. Nobody had asked her to learn this. Nobody had told her it would ever be useful. She had learned it because it was interesting, and because Yuna was the kind of person who, when something interested her, she could not leave it alone. She had been staring at the station's last broadcast for 17 of the 20 minutes Kang had asked for. The signal had looked, on the surface, like normal broadcast noise. The kind of background hum that relay stations put out constantly, the carrier frequency that kept the line open even when no actual message was being sent. But something in it sounded wrong to her. A small wrongness. A rhythm that didn't belong. She isolated it, pulled it out of the background noise layer by layer, the way you might peel paper off a wall. What she found underneath was 4 seconds of clean, deliberate signal, repeating on a loop. Not random, not corrupted, intentional. Someone on that station, in the last moments before it was destroyed, had buried a message in the noise where the automated systems would carry it forward even after the station was gone. The message was short. It contained coordinates, not a location but a reference point, the kind used in internal Vethal military records. And it contained a name. A single name, repeated 3 times in the Vethal's second formal register, which was used for official accusations. Yuna did not know who the name referred to, but she knew it was a name, and she knew it had been placed there deliberately by someone who had known they were about to die and had wanted someone to find it. She sat with that for a moment, then she told Kang. On the other side of the galaxy, or close enough that it felt that way, Princess Velari was sitting in a smaller room than her throne hall. It was a working room, with screens on every wall and a long table covered in documents and maps and half-finished reports. She did not sit at the head of the table. She sat in the middle, which was where she always sat when she was thinking rather than performing. Her senior analyst, a quiet older man named Reth, stood at the far end of the room reviewing the data that had come through from the human ship. He had been reviewing it for 12 minutes. He had run every verification test he could think of. He had passed it through the Empire's own satellite cross-referencing system. He had checked for signs of manipulation, for inserted timestamps, for any inconsistency in the metadata. He found nothing. "The data is accurate," Reth said finally. He said it the way you say something you would have preferred not to say. "The satellite confirmations are genuine. No human vessel was within operational range of Station 9 Outer at the time of destruction." Velhari did not say anything for a moment. She was looking at a point on the wall slightly above Reth's head, which was something she did when she was organizing her thoughts rather than avoiding something. "The energy signature," she said. "You have the sensor readings from the recovery team." "Yes." "Run them." Reth already knew what he would find. He had been avoiding running the comparison for the same reason Velhari had been avoiding asking for it. Because if the signature matched what they both suspected it might match, then this situation was no longer about human aggression. It was about something much closer to home and much more dangerous. He ran the comparison. He looked at the result. He looked at it for a long time. But then he turned the screen so Velhari could see it. She looked at it. Her 4 eyes went very still. The energy signature of the explosion that had killed 17 Vethal workers matched with 94% accuracy the output profile of a Vethal military-grade pulse cannon. Model designation IV-7, used by the Imperial Fleet's 2nd and 3rd Divisions. Not sold commercially, not exported, not available to humans or anyone outside the Empire. Someone inside the Empire had destroyed their own station, and then they had made it look like humanity had done it. Velhari stood up from the table. She walked to the window. The room had a long observation window that looked out into open space, and she stood there for a while with her hands behind her back, very still, the way her father stood when he was making decisions he did not like. She thought about the human, Kang. She thought about the way he had sat there while she screamed at him and had not moved, had not tried to stop her, had not defended himself immediately. She thought about how he had asked her one question, which station, and had then asked for 20 minutes not to argue but to gather information. She thought about the data he had sent, raw, unorganized, not made easier to read, just the real thing, exactly as it was, which was harder to doubt than any clean presentation would have been. She thought about what it meant that a human diplomat, on a diplomatic vessel with no military authority and no reason to help her, had immediately offered to help her. She picked up the channel to the Perseverance. Kang answered on the second signal. He was standing, not sitting, which meant he had been expecting her call. Behind him, she could see the communications officer, the woman, working at her console, still focused. "Your data is confirmed," Velhari said. She did not waste time getting to it. "Your ships were not in range. You did not destroy the station." "I know," Kang said. "The energy signature matches a Vethal weapon system," Kang said. "Yes, our xenobiologist found the same result approximately 22 minutes ago." Velhari looked at him. "You found it first." "By a small margin," he said, which was diplomatic and probably not entirely true. "Your Highness, we also found something else." He nodded to the woman at the console. "My communications officer, her name is Yuna, found a signal embedded in the station's last broadcast, a distress message hidden inside the carrier frequency. It contains a name." Velhari went very still. "What name?" Kang looked at Yuna. Yuna looked at the screen and said the name clearly, in the second formal register of the Vethal language, exactly as it appeared in the signal, pronouncing it correctly, which meant she had practiced Vethal formal speech for reasons of her own. The name was Commander Thesson. Velhari knew the name. Everyone in the Empire knew the name. Thesson was the commander of the Empire's 3rd Military Division, a decorated soldier, a man with powerful political connections, and a reputation for getting things done by ways that were not always clean. She knew the name, and her face did not move at all when she heard it, because she was a princess and she had been trained from childhood to keep her face still when something hit her. But her hands, which behind her back where the camera could not see them, closed slowly into fists. "How did your officer find the signal?" Velhari asked. Her voice was very quiet. "She listened," Kang said. "She said something about it sounded wrong, so she listened harder." Velhari looked past Kang to where Yuna was sitting. Yuna did not look up. She was still working, still listening to things probably. "Among the Vethal," Velhari said slowly, "that kind of work is done by machines?" "Among humans," Kang said. "Machines miss things sometimes. So people listen too." It was a simple thing to say, a small thing, but something in it settled into Velhari's chest in a way she did not fully have words for yet. She looked at this human, this calm, quiet, unhurried human who had done more in 40 minutes than her entire intelligence division had done in 3 days. And for the first time since she had opened that channel in fury, she did not see an enemy. She saw someone who had been paying attention when it mattered. "I need time," she said. "I need to verify the name. Investigate quietly." "Of course," Kang said. "We will be here." She closed the channel. She turned back to Reth. "Find out everything about Thesson's movements on the 14th, she said. "Quietly. Tell no one else." Reth nodded and left the room. Velhari stood at the window again for a long time, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a human woman had listened to a 4-second loop of noise and heard a dead person trying to speak. That felt to Velhari like something worth remembering. Ian Reth was good at moving quietly. It was one of the reasons Velhari kept him close. He had spent 40 years in the Empire's intelligence service before he retired, and retired people from that kind of work did not really retire. They just stopped getting paid officially. When Velhari had taken him on as her senior analyst 6 years ago, he had brought with him a lifetime of knowing how to find things without being noticed, and how to ask questions without revealing why he was asking. He spent 14 hours looking into Commander Thesson's movements on the 14th. What he found was not a confession. It was not clean evidence in the way that Kang's satellite logs were clean. It was the other kind of evidence, the kind made of small things that did not belong. A transport log to a fuel depot that had no record of the fuel. A communication channel opened and immediately closed to a relay node 2 sectors from Station 9 Outer. A set of 6 military personnel reassigned to a classified operation with no mission file attached. A weapons inventory report from the 3rd Division that had been submitted, amended, and then the original version quietly deleted. But not quietly enough, because Reth knew how to find deleted things. The original inventory report listed one IV-7 pulse cannon as unaccounted for. Reth brought all of this to Velhari and laid it on the table in front of her piece by piece, the way a doctor lays out the results of tests that confirm a diagnosis nobody wanted. She read everything. She read it twice. Then she sat back and looked at the ceiling for a while. Why? She said. Not to Reth. More to herself, or to the ceiling. Or to whatever part of the universe was responsible for situations like this one. But Reth answered anyway, because he was the kind of man who answered questions even when they weren't directed at him. Commander Thesson has political connections to 3 noble houses that have been losing influence for the past decade, Reth said. Houses that would benefit significantly from a destabilized empire. A war with humanity would stretch our resources thin. It would pull the sovereign's focus outward. It would create opportunities for people with military power to become more relevant, more necessary. He paused. Thesson is not just a soldier. He is a politician who carries a weapon. Velhari lowered her gaze from the ceiling. He killed 17 of our own people. Yes, station workers, not soldiers. People who manage communications equipment. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled in the way that cost something. He killed 17 of our own people to start a war with humanity, so that he and his allies could gain power in the chaos. Reth said nothing. There was nothing useful to add. Velhari stood up. She thought about what to do next in the careful way that her father had taught her, not jumping to the first answer, not acting on feeling, but mapping the options and understanding what each one cost. She could bring this to the sovereign directly. She could bring it to the imperial court. She could have Thesson quietly detained and questioned. She could do any of these things through official channels. The problem with official channels was that Thesson had people in those channels. His connections went deep, deep enough that if word reached the wrong person before she was ready, the evidence could disappear. Reth could disappear. She had seen this happen before. She had been a child when it happened, but she remembered. She needed to move fast and quietly, and she needed enough people around her that Thesson couldn't simply make the problem go away. She called her personal guard captain, a woman named Huna, who was loyal in the uncomplicated way that some people are loyal, not because of politics or reward, but because loyalty was simply the way she was made. Huna had been with Velhari since she was 16. She did not ask unnecessary questions. I need the flagship secured, Velhari told her. Quietly, no announcement. I need our most trusted people at every critical point. Communications, navigation, the docking bays. Do it in shifts so it looks like routine rotation. Huna looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then she said, How long do I have? 12 hours, maybe less. I'll need 8. You have 6. Huna left. Velhari then did something that surprised even Reth. She opened a channel to the Perseverance. Kang answered within seconds, which meant he had been keeping the channel ready. He was in the same room as before, but now there were dark circles under his eyes and his jacket was off and hanging on the back of his chair. He had not slept. She found to her own slight surprise that she respected this. Your Highness, he said. I have confirmed the name, she said, and I have confirmed the source. She paused for exactly 1 breath. You were correct. Once this was done from within the Empire, she watched his face for the reaction that most people had when they were proven right about something. The small, satisfied shift, the I told you so that even disciplined people let slip through sometimes. She did not see it. He just nodded as if this was information to be processed and acted on, not a point to be won. Then you have a problem, he said. Yes, she said. A large one. I am telling you this because you helped us find it, Because your officer found the signal that your own machines would not have thought to look for. And because she stopped. The next part was not the kind of thing she said easily. Because I called you in anger and made accusations that were not accurate, and you responded by trying to find the truth. That is not what I was trained to expect from a species we consider underdeveloped. He almost smiled. It was not a big smile, and it was gone quickly, but she caught it. We surprise people sometime, he said. You do, she said. Then, I am going to confront the sun. I have positioned people on the flagship. I believe he will not accept confrontation quietly. He has too much to lose. If he acts, things may become complicated. Complicated how? He has loyalists among the fleet, military ships that answer to him more than to the Empire. If he decides the situation is lost, he may act desperately. She looked at Kang directly. I am not asking for your help. The Vethal Empire does not ask for help from... You don't have to ask, Kang said quietly. We'll stay close. She looked at him for a moment. It was a strange thing, as she thought, to feel steadier because a human diplomat in a small ship with no weapons had said he would stay close. It did not make logical sense. The Perseverance could not fight a Vethal military vessel. It was built for talking, not fighting. And yet, don't approach the flagship, she said. Stay at a distance where you can observe. If something happens, you will know it. Understood, he said. She closed the channel. She straightened her jacket. She thought about the 17 people who had died managing communications equipment and going home to their families, and what she was going to say to Commander Thesson when she looked at him across the table. She had a great deal to say. In the ESV Perseverance, Kang turned to his team. Do-hun was awake and alert, which for him was the natural state during a crisis. Mireille had her arms crossed and was looking at the map of Vethal fleet positions that Yuna had quietly assembled over the past several hours. Yuna herself was on her third cup of something hot and was already monitoring the flagship's external communications frequencies. Do-hun, Kang said, I need to know everything the Perseverance can do that it is not supposed to do. Do-hun looked at him. Define not supposed to. Things that are technically possible, but not part of our official specifications. A slow smile crossed Do-hun's face. It was not a reassuring smile exactly. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting for someone to ask him exactly this question for a very long time. Sit down, Do-hun said. This is going to take a few minutes. Do-hun had a theory about limitations. He had held this theory for most of his adult life. And 11 years of deep space engineering had done nothing to change it. The theory was this. Limitations were not walls. They were starting points. A wall told you where you could not go. A starting point told you where to begin thinking. The Perseverance was a diplomatic vessel. It carried no weapons. Its hull was not military grade. Its engines were built for steady, reliable travel, not for speed or combat maneuvering. Its crew was small, its armor was light, and if any real military vessel decided to remove it from the situation, it would not take long. These were the limitations. Do-hun had noted them all. He had also spent 11 years on this ship learning every system, every connection, every wire and relay and power conduit, until he knew the Perseverance the way some people know an old house. Not just where the rooms were, but where the floors creaked and which walls were load-bearing and which ones you could take down if you needed to. He knew things about this ship that were not in the official specifications. He knew them because he had found them, or built them, or discovered them by accident in the middle of the night while fixing something else and then quietly written them down. He explained one of these things to Kang now. The ship's long-range communication array was, officially, a communication device. It sent and received signals across very large distances. To do this, it produced a focused beam of electromagnetic energy and directed it with great precision toward its target. The beam had to be focused and precise, because if it wasn't, the signal scattered and became unreadable. What happened if you removed the focusing parameters and allowed the beam to disperse broadly instead of narrowly? You got a very wide, very powerful burst of electromagnetic energy spreading outward in all directions from a central point. Not a signal anymore, just force. Unfocused, uncontrolled, and extremely disruptive to any unshielded electronic system within a significant radius. It would not destroy anything. It would not pierce military hull plating. It would not kill anyone. But it would knock out every unshielded system it touched. Navigation, communications, weapons targeting, engine controls, anything that was running hot without its shields up. The disruption would last between 8 and 20 minutes depending on how well hardened the systems were. Military ships, when their shields were up and they were running in battle configuration, were largely protected from this kind of disruption. But military ships that were currently engaged in boarding operations, ships with their weapons down, their shields offline to allow personnel movement between vessels, their systems running in open configuration because they were not expecting an external threat. Those ships were a different situation entirely. Kang listened to all of this. Then he said, "How long would it take you to set it up?" "The modification itself is about 40 minutes of physical work," Do-hun said. "I've already done most of it in my head. When the part that takes longer is calculating the dispersal radius precisely enough that we don't accidentally knock out the flagship's life support systems along with Thessan's ships." "How long for that calculation?" "Mirai's faster at that math than I am," Do-hun said. They both looked at Mirai. Mirai uncrossed her arms. "Send me the array specs," she said. "I'll have the radius calculation done before Do-hun finishes the physical modification." She was done in 31 minutes. Do-hun finished in 38. They moved the Perseverance into position slowly, without announcing themselves on any channel. Yuna was monitoring every frequency coming from the flagship Endless Dominion, and the picture being assembled was not a calm one. In the 2 hours since Velhari had closed their channel, 3 things had happened. First, and Commander Thessan had been summoned to a private meeting with the princess. Yuna caught fragments of internal fleet communications that suggested the meeting had not gone well, that Thessan had, within the first 10 minutes, stopped pretending and started threatening. Second, 6 military vessels registered to the 3rd Division had shifted positions, moving from their patrol routes toward the flagship without orders from Fleet Command. Yuna recognized the pattern. They were surrounding the flagship, not to protect it, to control it. Third, the flagship's docking bays had gone to lockdown, and Yuna's guard rotations, the ones Velhari had quietly put in place, had been met by Thessan's loyalists already in position. There had been a confrontation. Velhari's people had held 3 of the 4 critical points, or they had not held the communications hub, which meant Thessan could, if he chose to, cut off the princess from external contact entirely. He had not done so yet, which meant he was still negotiating, or buying time. Kang knew what buying time meant. He opened a channel to Velhari on a secondary frequency that Yuna had quietly flagged as still open, one that ran through a different relay pathway than the main communications hub. Velhari answered. She was in a different room now, smaller. There were sounds in the background that Kang recognized from training simulations. The kind of sounds a ship made when people inside it were moving fast and not being careful about furniture. "He acted," Kang said. "Yes," Velhari said. Her voice was flat and very controlled. "His ships are in position. He is trying to negotiate a—" She stopped. Sunan, a sound behind her. Then Yuna's voice, reporting something quickly in the 2nd Vethal military dialect, which Yuna was already translating in the background. "He is trying to negotiate a political solution, which is not what he actually wants. He wants time for his ships to complete their positions." "How long before they are complete?" "Reth says 12 minutes. After that, he controls the approach vectors to the flagship." "We'll move in 8, Kang said. A pause. "You told me you had no weapons." "We don't," Kang said. "We have an engineer who finds limitations personally offensive. That's different." He could not read her expression clearly through the small secondary channel screen, but she said nothing to stop him, which he took as agreement. He looked at Do-hun. Do-hun was already at the array console, to his large hands moving with the kind of careful speed that precision work required. "Yuna," Kang said, "I need you to pull the public emergency frequency, the one that broadcasts to every Vethal citizen receiver in range. Can you access it?" Yuna was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "It's a public frequency," she said. "It's not secured. Technically, anyone with the right equipment can broadcast on it." "Do we have the right equipment?" Another 3 seconds. "We do now," she said. "Don't broadcast yet. Just get ready." He looked at the clock. 8 minutes. He spent those 8 minutes thinking about what he was going to say on a public frequency to the citizens of an alien empire, in a situation that the Outer Reach Accord absolutely did not cover, and that would certainly require a very long report afterward. So he thought about the 17 workers who had died. He thought about Velhari standing at the window of her working room, looking out at the stars. He thought about Yuna listening harder when something sounded wrong, and Dohun building something useful out of something that was only supposed to talk. He thought about what the Perseverance was, really. Not the ship, but what it represented. A small vessel full of people who were supposed to talk their way through everything. Sent to a corner of space where nobody expected much from them. He thought that was fine. Low expectations were useful sometimes. At the 8-minute mark, Dohun said, "Ready?" Kang said, "Do it." The pulse was silent. No sound, no flash, nothing visible to the naked eye. The Perseverance simply transmitted, and the transmission spread outward in a wide ring. And every ship in that ring that was running without its shields up, every vessel that had been so busy surrounding the flagship that it had left its own systems open, went dark simultaneously. 6 ships, all 6 of Theson's coup vessels. Dark. Kang said, "Yuna." Yuna broadcast. She broadcast on the public emergency frequency, in clear Veth-Al, a complete account. The destruction of Station 9 Outer, the energy signature that matched Veth-Al military technology, the distress signal hidden in the station's last broadcast, the name it contained, the evidence Reth had assembled, and the location and current status of Commander Thesson. She presented it plainly. She did not editorialize. She did not accuse beyond what the evidence showed. She just said what had happened in order, clearly. The way you tell a story to someone who deserves to know it. The broadcast reached 11 inhabited Veth-Al systems. It reached 53 military vessels. It reached the public receivers of approximately 400 million Veth-Al citizens. Kang then waited. Dohun leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and looked at the ceiling. Mirai sat down very carefully in her chair. Yuna took off her headset, set it on the desk, and picked up her rice crackers. Within 47 minutes, loyal Veth-Al fleet ships began to converge on the flagship from 3 directions. Within 2 hours, Commander Thesson was in custody. His loyalists, cut off from their commander, and facing a fleet that had heard everything, surrendered without significant resistance. The coup lasted less than a day. Wemirai said quietly to Kang, "We may have violated the non-interference treaty." Kang considered this. "File it under Saved an Empire," he said. Mirai looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her datapad and made a note. Veth Prime was old. Not old the way mountains were old, or the way stories were old, but old the way civilizations are old when they have been building for so long that the oldest parts of what they made are buried under newer things. And the newer things have become old themselves. And the whole planet carries the weight of it in a way you can feel when you first stand on its surface and look up. The sky was a pale amber color. The gravity was slightly higher than Earth standard, which Kang felt in his shoulders and in the backs of his knees. The air smelled like something mineral, like the inside of an old stone building. The city that surrounded the Imperial Palace stretched out in every direction as far as he could see. Towers and bridges and structures that had no human names for their shapes. All of it built in the colors of deep red and dark gold that the Veth-Al favored. The Perseverance had been given a landing bay. Not a parking orbit, not an outer dock. An actual landing bay inside the perimeter of the Imperial complex, which Yuna had quietly noted was an honor that no human vessel had ever been given before. She had not said this out loud on the approach, because some things were better noted and then set aside until the right moment. Kang walked through the corridors of the Imperial Palace with Yuna to his left, Dohun to his right, Sorbet and Mirai slightly behind him in the way she always walked when she was observing everything. Yuna led them, walking ahead in silence. The palace guards they passed stood very still and watched them with the careful, evaluating look that soldiers use on people they are not certain about yet. The throne room was larger than Kang had expected, though he was not sure why he had set his expectations anywhere in particular. The ceiling was high enough that the upper portions of it were lost in a kind of architectural shadow. The floor was dark stone, polished so smooth that it reflected the long lines of amber light that came from panels set into the walls. The room was full. Members of the imperial court stood in formal rows, senior military officers in their division colors, noble house representatives in their house patterns, UN advisors and officials, and people whose precise roles Kang could not identify. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, sat Sovereign Orin. He was very old, older than anyone Kang had ever stood in the same room with. The Vethal lived long, and Orin had lived long even by their standards. His face was deeply lined, his four eyes a pale, washed-out gold rather than the bright amber of younger Vethal. He wore no armor, no formal military dress, just a long, dark robe and a single narrow circlet of some dark metal. He did not need anything else to communicate authority. He simply had it, the way some people simply have height. Velhari stood to his right, one step below the throne. She was in full formal dress now, deep crimson, precise, every detail deliberate. She was looking at Kang as he walked into the room, and her expression was the careful neutral of someone who has decided how they are going to behave before the situation began. The four of them walked the length of the floor and stopped at the appropriate distance. Kang gave the formal Vethal greeting, a slight lowering of the head and the open palm gesture that Una had made him practice 17 times on the transport down. It wasn't perfect, but it was respectful, which was the point. The sovereign looked at them for a long moment. Not unfriendly, not warm, just looking, the way someone looks when they are deciding how much of what they already know to acknowledge. Then Orin spoke. His voice was lower and slower than Velhari's, worn smooth by age. "You assisted our empire," he said. In standard, not Vethal, a deliberate choice Kang knew that meant something in this setting. "You assisted us in a matter that endangered our sovereign house. You identified a conspiracy that our own intelligence division did not identify. You acted, using means available to you, to prevent a coup." A pause. "And you broadcast the truth of it to 400 million of our citizens before we had the opportunity to manage the information ourselves." He said the last part without obvious criticism, which was, Kang suspected, its own kind of test. "Yes," Kang said. "I apologize for the last part." Orin looked at him. "Do you?" "No," Kang said, "but I thought I should offer." Something moved at the corners of Orin's mouth. It was very brief. "Sit down," he said, which was an extraordinary thing to say in a formal imperial audience. When the sound of shuffling from the court behind them suggested that several people present were quite surprised by it. Chairs were brought. Kang sat. His team sat. Una brought a chair for herself and placed it against the wall, which was not protocol, and Velhari noticed and did not say anything. Orin folded his hands in his lap. "I have one question," he said. "A direct question. I am told humans respond well to directness." "We do," Kang said. "Why did you help us?" The room was very quiet. It was the kind of quiet that happens when many people are trying not to be heard listening. Kang thought about the question. He did not think for a long time. He had thought about some version of this question since the moment he had decided to stay close to the flagship, but he thought for long enough that the answer was honest rather than prepared. "Because 17 people died," he said, "and the person who called me about it was angry, which meant she cared about them. That seemed worth paying attention to." He looked at Orin and then, briefly, at Velhari. "And because whoever destroyed that station wanted to start a war, and we didn't want a war, we've had enough of those." Another pause. "And because your daughter, even when she was screaming at us, was trying to get justice for her people. We understand that. It's something we do too." Orin was quiet for a long moment. The room was quiet with him. Then Velhari stepped forward. So she stepped down from the platform. One step, which put her level with the floor, level with Kang and his team. In the formal language of Vethal imperial ceremony, stepping down from the royal platform was significant. It was not something done casually. She spoke in Vethal first for the court, in the first formal register, the one used for official declarations. Una translated quietly into Kang's earpiece as she spoke. Velhari said that the Vethal Empire had classified humanity since their first contact under the designation of developing primitive species, a category reserved for civilizations that had not yet reached a threshold of technological, social, or diplomatic maturity considered sufficient for full peer recognition. She said that this classification had been reviewed 3 times in the past 100 years, and each time had been maintained. She said that classifications of this kind were not changed quickly or lightly or for reasons of sentiment. She said that she was changing it now. She reclassified Earth and its people as peer civilization, first contact recognized. She said it in full formal language, with the precise legal wording that made it binding under imperial law, with her father's name and authority attached to it as required by protocol. She said that this was the highest diplomatic classification the Vethal Empire granted, that it had not been awarded to any civilization in more than 200 years, and that it meant, in practical terms, that humanity was now recognized as an equal party in all matters of trade, treaty, or territorial negotiation, and formal relations with the Empire. In the earpiece, Yuna's voice had gone very quiet while she translated. Not because she was losing the thread, but because she was having some kind of feeling about it that was getting in the way of her professional composure. She finished the translation and then said nothing for a moment. Then she said in a voice that was almost steady, "Kang, she reclassified us." Kang was already looking at Vilhari. Vilhari was looking back at him. Around them, the court was very still, the kind of still that happens when a room full of people understands that they have witnessed something historical and are not quite sure what to do with that yet. Kang stood up. He gave the formal greeting again. Yuna had not told him to. He had not planned it. It simply seemed like the right thing to do, so he did it. Vilhari returned it. The Vethal version, the same gesture performed precisely with a slight head incline that indicated equal standing. In 200 years, no one in this room had seen a Vethal royal give that gesture to a human. Behind Kang, he heard Do-hun exhale very slowly. He heard Miri's pen moving. She was writing something on her datapad because she always wrote things down when they mattered. He heard Yuna very quietly tear the corner off a piece of paper for no reason other than she needed to do something with her hands. Sovereign Orin spoke again. "You will stay on Veth Prime for 3 days," he said. "There will be formal dinners and meetings and a great deal of ceremony." A pause. "Hamri, I am told you brought the engineer who built the electromagnetic device." Do-hun straightened in his chair. "The Imperial Engineering Collective has requested a meeting with him," Orin said. He looked at Do-hun with mild amusement. "They are curious about a communication array that was used as a weapon." Do-hun said very calmly, "I have 12 pages of notes about what I would do differently next time." Something happened in the Sovereign's eyes that might, if you were being generous, be called warmth. "I imagined you might," he said. Outside, through the high windows of the throne room, the amber sky of Veth Prime stretched wide and old above the ancient city. Somewhere in it, Earth's small diplomatic vessel sat in a landing bay that no human ship had ever used, each waiting for a crew that had come here expecting to discuss trade routes and would go home having changed the history between two civilizations. Not with weapons, not with armies. With a question, a woman who listened harder than machines, an engineer who hated limitations, a scientist who wrote everything down, and a man who had decided, somewhere in the middle of a sleepless night, that 17 dead people deserved a real answer. It had been, all things considered, a productive 72 hours. The 3 days on Veth Prime were not restful. There were dinners, as the Sovereign had promised. Long ones with many courses that Mirai photographed carefully before eating and cataloged in a notebook she kept specifically for that purpose. When there were formal meetings in tall rooms with serious people on both sides who spoke carefully and listened to each other in the way that people listen when they know the conversation matters. There were ceremonies with specific protocols that Yuna had studied on the transport over, and Do-hun had pretended to study and then improvised through with a kind of cheerful confidence that somehow worked. There was also, on the second day, a 4-hour meeting between Do-hun and 7 engineers from the Vethal Imperial Engineering Collective. Kang was not in that meeting. Nobody from his team was, except Do-hun. He came out of it looking like a man who had been given a very large gift and was not quite sure what to do with it yet. A little dazed, a little bright-eyed. He did not say much about what had been discussed. He did say, either at dinner that evening, that he might need to request a longer assignment on the Perseverance than he had originally planned. Velhari met with Kang once, privately, on the morning of the 3rd day. It was a short meeting. They sat in a small room off one of the palace's side corridors, an informal place by the standards of the building, which meant it only had 4 guards outside instead of 12. She had tea. He had coffee, which someone had sourced from somewhere, and which he suspected Una had arranged before he knew he would need it. They did not talk about the treaty negotiations, which were happening in other rooms with other people. They did not talk about trade routes or territorial boundaries or the formal documentation of the new diplomatic classification. Other people were handling those things and would continue handling them for months, probably years. They talked about the station, about the 17 people who had worked there. Velhari told him their names, which she had memorized. Not because protocol required it, but because she believed that the people responsible for a civilization were obligated to know the names of the people who died under their protection. She said this matter-of-factly, the way she said most things. But Kang listened to all 17 names and nodded after each one, and she noticed. "You will remember them," she said. It was not quite a question. "Yes," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she asked him something she had clearly been deciding whether to ask for 2 days. "The woman, Una. Hi, who taught her our formal registers?" "Nobody taught her," Kang said. "She taught herself. She found recordings in the ship's archive 3 years ago and started listening." Velhari was quiet. 3 years ago, for no reason except interest. That's how she put it, yes. "I would like to speak with her before you leave," Velhari said. "Not formally, just speak." "I'll tell her," Kang said. Yuna's meeting with Velhari lasted 2 hours and was not recorded, because neither of them wanted it recorded. What came out of it, practically speaking, was an offer. A formal cultural exchange position on Veth Prime, the first of its kind, attached to the Imperial Communications Office. A human presence in the heart of the Empire, yet doing the work of building understanding between 2 civilizations at the level of language and signal, and the small details that official treaties never fully captured. Una accepted before Velhari finished making the offer. She spent the entire transport back to the Perseverance, reorganizing her personal belongings into a smaller volume to make room for the additional books she was going to need. On the day they left Veth Prime, Kang stood in the landing bay next to the Perseverance for a while before boarding. The amber sky was clear. The city stretched out beyond the palace walls in every direction, old and layered and enormous. He had been doing this work for 11 years, moving between stars, talking in rooms, trying to make things slightly better and slightly less likely to explode. And he had never stood in a place quite like this before. A place he had gotten to by accident, through a furious phone call in the middle of the night, and a woman who listened harder than machines, and an engineer who found limitations personally offensive. He thought about the report he would have to write. It was going to be very long. Do-hun boarded first because he had equipment to secure and never trusted anyone else to do it properly. Miri boarded second, already reading something on her datapad. Una boarded last, after hugging the small bag she was taking with her to Veth Prime, the way a person hugs a thing they are attached to, and then setting it aside carefully near the bay door, where it would be collected later. She stopped next to Kang before going up the ramp. "Do you think they'll be all right?" she said. Not about the Empire, not about the diplomatic situation. She meant the Vethal themselves, the ordinary ones, the ones who had heard the public broadcast and learned that one of their senior military commanders had killed 17 of their own people for political ambition. "I think they will be," Kang said. "They have someone in charge who cares about the names of the people who died." He looked at the sky. "That counts for a lot." Una nodded. Then she went up the ramp. Kang stood in the bay for another minute. Then he went inside and sat at his desk and started writing the report. It was 42 pages long by the time it was finished, which was not his longest report but was in the top 5. The section on how the crisis began was 1 sentence. An alien princess called in rage, and we listened. Back on Veth Prime, Velhari stood at the observation deck of the Imperial Palace on the evening after the human vessel left. The deck was open to the air. The Vethal liked open air, even at height, even in the cold. And the amber sky was darkening to a deep orange at the edges where the sun was going down. Her aide, a young man named Inso, who had been with her for 8 months and was still learning how to read her silences, stood a respectful distance behind her. After a while, Inso asked, "What did you make of them?" "The humans," he asked carefully, because it was a large question to ask a princess, and he was not entirely certain it was his place. But Velhari had a habit, on the observation deck, of answering questions she might not answer in other places. She was quiet for a moment. The sun continued to go down. The city below them was starting to light up. Thousands of small points of gold against the darkening stone. "They listen," she said finally. Her voice was not loud, just clear. "Even when they are afraid, even when they are outmatched, even when no one asks them to, they listen and then they act, and they do not seem to need the situation to be fair before they decide to do what is right." Inso thought about this. "Is that unusual? Among young civilizations?" Velhari said. "Yes. Among old ones?" A pause. "Also yes." She turned away from the view. "We should have been paying attention to them a long time ago." She walked back inside. Inso followed. In the formal records of the Vethal Empire, the reclassification of humanity would be noted as a diplomatic milestone, the result of a crisis navigated with unexpected skill by a small Earth vessel operating in the Empire's outer territory. The notation was precise and dry, the way official records always were, because official records were made by people who had not been in the room. In the informal records, the ones kept by people who had been in the room, it was described differently. In Mirai's published xenobiological study, the event was mentioned in the introduction as evidence that first contact moments between civilizations were shaped as much by personality and accident as by policy. The study became required reading at 14 universities. In Do-hoon's notes to the Imperial Engineering Collective, there was a footnote in the technical documentation that read simply, "The thing about a problem is that it usually has a solution. You just have to be annoyed enough by the problem to find it." The collective printed this footnote and put it on the wall of their main workshop. Yuna's cultural exchange position lasted 4 years, during which time she produced the first comprehensive guide to Vethal formal communication registers written by a human in a human language for a human audience. She dedicated it to the 17 workers of Station 9 Outer, whose names she listed in full on the dedication page, in both Vethal and Standard. Kang received a commendation from Earth's diplomatic office, which he accepted politely and put in a drawer. He received also a small carved object from Velhari, a piece of dark Veth prime stone shaped into a form that had no direct human equivalent, but that the accompanying note described as the shape a thing makes when it decides to stop falling. He kept it on his desk for the rest of his career. People asked about it sometimes. He always told them it was a gift from someone who had called him very angry one night, and that things had worked out all right. They usually had more questions after that. He usually made coffee and answered them. In the grand record of galactic history, the first full diplomatic recognition between humanity and the Vethal Empire would be remembered as one of the stranger turning points, brought about not by decades of careful negotiation or the slow accumulation of political goodwill, but by 72 hours of a small ship full of quiet, stubborn, endlessly curious people who had decided that the truth was worth finding, that the dead were worth naming, and that when someone called you in the middle of the night in a fury, the best thing you could do was listen. The universe had seen many civilizations rise and reach for the stars. It had seen many of them fail. Through arrogance, through fear, through the simple inability to hear anything over the sound of their own certainty. Humanity had its own arrogances, its own fears, its own certainties. But it also had Yuna, who listened to things machines ignored. It had Do-hoon, who looked at walls and saw starting points. It had Mirai, who wrote everything down because everything was worth recording. And it had Kang, who sat very still while a princess screamed at him across the stars and asked one question and waited. That, in the end, was what the story was about. Not the coup, not the weapon, not the reclassification. The story was about a phone call, about what happened when someone answered it the right way. And what the right way turned out to be was very simple. You listened. You took it seriously. You did the work. And then if you were lucky, and sometimes even if you weren't, things turned out all right.